The reality of it is that like no, like the probabilities weren't 100% this is a better lineup or 0% this is a worse lineup. It was somewhere in the 50-60% each way range, right? And so if you're between that range, like it at the end of the day, it's a call that someone needs to make, and we made the call, and we stand by the decision. We thought it was the right decision to make at the time with information we had.
Hey guys, Parks Owsley here with the Shotcaller, joined by Sebastian Park, the Vice President of Esports for Clutch Gaming and the Houston Rockets. You guys have had a pretty rough last couple of weeks.
Rough 10 days.
Rough 10 days. You've had some roster changes, and I just want to talk about some of that and some of the decisions that have been made. So right off the bat, how was the whole decision process made from, going from the main roster who you've had for a split and a half to putting in some of your academy guys that you've been training up?
Sure. So I think the big thing there was that we've been really impressed with what our academy coaches have been doing with our academy guys, Vulcan in particular, Piglet in particular, Moon in particular. We wanted to give them a shot on the LCS stage. These are Vulcan, especially. We want to see how he performed. He's a rookie. He's never played on stage before. He'll keep his rookie status as long as he doesn't play another 3 more games, I think. So if he plays just 2 more, he'll still be a rookie. And we were trying to see how it can fit into our schedule, right? After an 0-2 week, we got together and we were like, hey, what are our goals, right? And our goals from day one, even before the org was created, was to make Worlds, right? Like that was our year 1 goal. And it wasn't to make playoffs and lose in 6th place. It wasn't to like scrape into playoffs this way or that way. It was to figure out identity and figure out a play style that allow us to win. And so with that in mind, like we were looking at roster and we were like, okay, let's maybe inject some variance here, right? I mean, I think it's unequivocally true that Hakuo is much better than Vulcan still. And I think everyone agrees with that. And I think like Vulcan has improved though at a rate that is much faster than pretty much every other non-top 2, top 3 support in the world, right? Like in my mind, especially when it comes to support role, like I have like Nick as one of the best support players, if not the best support players in NA. And I have Vulcan being this poor guy who was drafted 3rd in scouting grounds, who probably would have been a starter on like 7 other teams in the LCS, right? And so it was important for us to like give someone who's been working that hard and trying that hard opportunities to shine. So we brought him along to Miami as our sub, and then we brought him along this week to have him see some play against some really good bot lanes, because we think that's the best way to like give him the type of exposure he needs, and also to inject a little bit of variance in us. We play a very standard style, almost always. And so one of the graphics that really stood out to me last week was, or yesterday rather, was that they were running the number of people who run Smite mid and the number of people who funneled. And like, 100 Thieves was 4-1 on funnel. And we were like 0-0 on both of those things because we always ran a standard comp, roughly speaking, to all the craziness here. And so it's just really cool with this idea of like, hey, let's start a few more players so that we can like vary the champion pools that people have to prep against us. So they don't see the same 5 guys over and over again. And then go from there. And so that was a lot of the thinking that went into it. And it was sort of weird because I felt like a lot of the thinking was, oh, you guys bench X, Y, and Z. And that wasn't it, right? Like when you go rewatch a lot of Lyra's plays, for example, his pathing on Kindred is like strictly better than almost anyone else in the LCS right now. If you go watch Nick or Apollo play, like sure they have bad games, but we all have bad games. And that wasn't really the reason. It was really trying to prep for not only the future, but also to improve our chances of making Worlds.
We see this in other sports where, you get to sub out. Luckily for them, it's, maybe a play or a couple minutes or something. But yeah, it kind of throws the enemy for a loop. So I totally understand that reasoning. So if, for instance, you guys have 3 imports right now, and if you wanted to make another change going forward, it would be somewhat difficult because if you put, Apollo back in for Piglet, then you have 2 imports, or you have 3, either 3 right up or 2 down. So do you feel like the import slot kind of, the fact that you can only have 1 in Academy, but you're allowed to have 2 in LCS, does that kind of mess around with your ability to experiment at all?
Yeah, I would say that there are 2 parts of that. I'm not a huge believer in the import rule as a rule. Like, I actually don't particularly care for it. I've let Riot know I don't particularly care for it. I understand why it's been implemented, but I do think that NA talent is really good, and that like you don't need an import rule to like protect NA talent. Like, the best NA players will still be the best NA players. Like, that's not going to change suddenly. And I think that's worth doing. But insofar as we live in a world with the import rule, I understand why there's a one import limit on Academy. That makes more sense to me. Like, here's an environment where we really want to train up North American talent. North American talent being the focal point of it all. Why have a foreigner or an import fill up your Academy team? And so it does create a little bit of confusion rule set wise, but it shouldn't really affect our ability to do things. It'll just mean that we will do different iterations of things.
Okay. And then how is the whole communication between the team? So, obviously I imagine it was more top down. How is it then communicated with the players? And then what did you do going forward? Was it kind of a hard, this is what we're trying, or was everyone's input kind of considered?
Yeah, I mean, so I think for the most part, everyone's input was considered, right? Like, one thing that we've talked about often is that there's a difference between being heard and having the thing you want be done, right? And so that's a difference that's hard to articulate at times, but we're listening to everyone, and we're listening to our staff, we're listening to our analysts and scouts and coaches, both from the Academy and the LCS, and then we're trying out different things, right? And so insofar as we're trying these things out, we came to a conclusion where, and it wasn't conclusive, right? Like, I think one of the things that people will look at, it's like, oh, you were certain in this decision, you went on stage and you lost, sucks, right? But the reality of it is that like, no, like the probabilities weren't 100% this is a better lineup or 0% this is a worse lineup. It was somewhere in the 50-60% each way range, right? And so if you're between that range, like it at the end of the day, it's a call that someone needs to make, and we made the call, and we stand by the decision, even though it could have played out differently. We could have won these games, or we could have lost these games. I think those are we did lose these games. I guess that did play out that way. But it doesn't change the fact that we thought it was the right decision to make at the time with information we had. And hopefully we'll continue to feel that way moving forward.
For sure. And you actually, obviously operate with a lot more information than the average fan does. And so I wrote an article trying to figure it out myself. Mm-hmm. And it's actually a good thinking process, just trying to write everything down. And I saw a lot of questions that I was trying to answer either by myself or even just putting out that I had. Mm-hmm. That were getting put up on Reddit and Twitter as well.
Sure.
And, people saying, why trade this person or why move that around or all of this? Well, you guys obviously have a reason. So what are some of the kind of the specifics that, or things that complicate stuff from an org that just regular fans and viewers don't necessarily get to see?
Sure. So one big one is that there are 4 days of practice before the next week of play, and everyone takes Monday off. And so that means there just aren't that many new games to play different combinations with. So one thing we've heard is like, why not run out Apollo Vulcan or Piglet Hakuo or one of those combinations? You just can't do that because people need to practice together. We've tried, and we're testing, and people are practicing together, but it's just not something that we would necessarily do. And playing in the Academy League isn't like this bad thing either. One thing that I think people talked about initially was like, oh, like they're playing Academy, that must mean they're not playing the LCS, where no, that's not true. Like, we've had Solo play a couple games in Academy just so that he can get some practice on Aatrox and like some stage time with carry champions, because he's playing a lot of tanks for us a lot of the time. That's fine. Like, that's Academy has multiple purposes, and being able to have players go down there and practice different strategies without necessarily the pressure of bringing it out on stage, I think is a really good place to be. And so that's something that I think a lot of people are afraid to we're afraid to experiment with, right? When you have relegation, when you were like about to get sent down, and if you didn't win, you're just screwed. Things sucked. It felt bad. Whereas now we can like flip down its head and be like, actually, you know what? We're going to try a lot of these different things. We're going to be able to like iterate on things, and we'll be fine. And we won't have to worry about, us being kicked out, right? Because it's not like we're not trying. It's just we want to try new things and explore different options.
Thank you for that insight. And you touched on, the switching between Is there a specific rule there with, how much, like how often can solo actually play down? I know that playing up, you might lose rookie status or whatever, but how often are you allowed to do double duty?
Yeah, so you're not allowed to do double duty for that consecutive week that often. I think I have to go back and double check, but I think you're only allowed to do it twice, like 2 weekends worth of double duty. But you can like play down and up as often as you like. So
Is that per player or?
per player, yeah. So like if for example, let's say who's a player who has never played? Oh, let's say Featherton, right? Like let's say we just really wanted Fabian to go stomp some people in the academy. We send him down there. He plays a couple games in the LCS. I have to go double check the rules, and I should know this, but I think he did that twice.
Okay.
Before he has to pick one for that weekend, which is a great rule. That we've had some health issues in the past, and we've had some that's happened before, family issues or things that like are really important to the players personally. We can like stop someone back in there and fill in for the time being.
Awesome. Yeah, I just wasn't sure, is this a hard cut? Is only solo allowed to do it now that he's done it a few times?
Right. No, it's nothing like that. I think the other rule is, in addition to there being one import rule in the Academy League, there's a 3 veteran maximum. And so when Cloud9 sent down Jensen, Smoothie, and Sneaky, they were fine. And when we sent down like Lyra, Haku, Apollo, we were fine. But we couldn't flip the rosters completely. We can't suddenly start Sun, Moon, everyone like in the LCS and start our entire LCS roster in Academy. That would not look well for anyone.
It's all about developing that talent.
Right.
So you also did this in the midst of the trade deadline as well, and so it's funny that you guys had some big changes, but they were all within your organization.
For sure.
Do you have any thoughts about the trade deadline? I know you also come from a basketball background, so maybe you have some better insight there.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really interesting is not the trades people see. They're all the trades that almost happened, right? There are probably, off the top of my head, about half dozen really big trades that were about to happen, and like one piece fell apart or one thing didn't work out the way it did, or someone vetoed one part of the trade. And so if you think about like the half dozen of those trades that didn't happen, the trade deadline's a ton of fun. I think we've only for what's worth, this is a huge development for us because last year, my understanding is no one wanted to trade. Like the only trade that had ever been done prior was Darduck and Xmithy, right? And this year alone, we've had 2 or 3 trades between organizations, which I think is great. There's much more of an appetite among organizations to trade with each other because of the reduction of the removal of relegation, franchising, the idea that at some point you want to not only improve yourself but also improve other teams and go back and forth. Maybe not for this year, but for the next year. And being able to plan around that, I think, is an incredibly important thing to look into. And so that's sort of how I look at the entire space right now. And it was a lot of fun. The flip side is that you also have to work in parallel. So the people who are working on the trades were separate from the people working on hey, what are internal moves that we could be making? So we were fortunate enough to have the resources to do both.
Awesome. And you guys, or I guess as a league, you do want to improve the other teams because then, this is who you practice against over and over again. And so, of course, you want to make sure that you are the one who go to Worlds, but you want to be ready for Worlds. So.
Right. I mean, I would say it's less that, and it's more, you don't want to be the Kansas City Royals, right? To use a baseball example, what sucks is being a middle-of-the-road team. You either want to be a Worlds team or you want to be preparing for next year. You really don't want to be in a situation where you're a middling team that isn't doing very well. And so what I mean by improving another team, I mean they'll improve in the short term, but in this trade, we'll improve in the long term. I think those are the best types of trades. I think that's a lot of what the thinking, and I don't know exactly, but I think 100 Thieves made a great trade. I think Anda is a really good player, and he's still a rookie, and he's still trying, not actually a rookie, but he's still trying to get better. And so if they thought that, hey, we can make improvements with JJ and Anda and having these guys play alongside veterans like Keen and Flame and Wild Turtle, that's, I think, a really good way to restructure the composition of the team. What would suck is if you went the opposite direction and then didn't end up winning. So that, I think, is the back and forth and the push and pull.
And do you feel like with the franchising, we actually are setting up ourselves better for 2019 Worlds? Do you think that a lot of people are actually looking longer term, maybe even not just longer term to the Worlds this year, but in a year or 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, I just did the lounge stream with Steve, and Steve was talking about ping and a lot of these different things that were happening infrastructure-wise to like make us a better organization than NA. My big thing was that we have a lot of convergence. I think that it takes time for infrastructures to pay dividends. Insofar as we keep investing into the infrastructure, like it will eventually pay dividends. I truly believe that. And so, yes, like last split was the first split where we had, I think, only like 3 rookies. It was like the fewest number of rookies we had ever seen in the LCS. This split, you can name just like a handful, like probably 10 Academy players who have made it into the LCS. We're starting to see churn in the LCS. I think that's really healthy. I think that makes the teams better, and it makes the organizations better, and I think you get a better product. The second thing is, it's not that we are all bad. Like, we're not great, that is for sure. But the actual, if you go back and watch like Team Liquid and MSI, right? Like, they had some troubles a couple of the days, but they did really well a couple of the days. Like, it's that back and forth that people over-indexed on, right? By definition, if Fnatic and Team Liquid were tied and had to play a tiebreaker, that meant, and Fnatic was considered this great team the first couple of days, and Team Liquid was considered this awful team the first couple of days. Well, certainly, clearly something happened the days 3 and 4, such that they were tied during MSI, right? And similar to Rift Rivals, like there were some really good wins, but there were also like 100 Thieves trying some really cool like different strategies. I'm sure if they had gone in and played their general funnel strategy, they would have won a lot of games. And so, that's the type of thing that we hear a lot from the community, and I think they're fair critiques, but that there are like systematic answers that don't involve like harsh or like drastic changes.
And yeah, and they're not operating with quite the same level of understanding of what's going on.
Oh, I think so. I saw a Reddit thread that was pretty cool, which was like every team should have a Silver 3 player, like to tell them what's up. And I actually agree a lot with those threads. I think oftentimes the community has a pretty good grasp of what's happening, and sometimes teams and organizations fall into the trap of like overthinking things as opposed to being like, yeah, you're right. We should probably just like not let that happen. Right? So,
all right, I'm going to change things up really quick. How did you guys come up with the best caster thing? I know it was kind of put out there, but you guys are really going for it and helping some different parts of League of Legends and esports in general develop. And so how did you get all of that set up and decide that it was something you really wanted to do?
Sure. So we the core idea came from something that I really loved when I first got started in esports, which was IPL, the IGN Pro League, back in the StarCraft days, and then subsequently the fine folks over at Day 9 TV with their After Hours Gaming League ran these really cool caster competitions to give people the opportunity to cast games, right? And I was talking to I was talking to Captain Flowers, and he was telling me about how he would cast these like midnight Chinese games to get experience. And when we saw that we can do something with the Academy stream, we were like, hey, we have the resources, and we want to give exposure to these guys and girls who are really good at casting, because casters are a big part of the ecosystem. Azale is amazing. Like the fact that we found people like Kobe and Captain Flowers and Pastry Time and I should probably mention everyone's name now, shouldn't I? Freak, who else? Everyone. Like,
everyone.
Rib, right?
All of them.
Yeah, Rib. Oh, Rib is great. Like, but like. The reason they were able to like come up was because they had the opportunities to cast things and do cool things, and now they're established parts of our community. And so that's the thinking behind it. The actual implementation really relied on a lot of our staff. So Hayden Rome, Hunter Segesta were 2 of the main people driving it alongside Ryan Friedman. These are people who like you don't hear about publicly in the staff, but they're actively in the weeds trying to like structure the competition. They watched every single submission received, they watched the entire stream of, right? And listen to the caster and rank them, etc. And then you have people like on the ground at the team house, like guys like we have a guy named Andrew Barton who's a team manager who legit just anytime we had somebody fill in would go grab Curry, who was happy to volunteer, or Apollo, who was happy to volunteer and get them the type of stuff they wanted. That's the type of, I think, organizational teamwork that required to like get this stuff out. And we're really fortunate to have done it. And I think it's gone okay. Like, hopefully more improvements next year, if there is a next year. I think there's a next year, but I've been really happy with the quality of the casting that we've seen, especially this past weekend's games. I thought were really well done.
Nice. Well, that's really cool. You know, it was super awesome watching the casting develop there. So thank you guys for helping that develop as well. And that does it for us. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for watching. Best of luck going forward, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching that video. To see some more Shotcaller League of Legends content, you can find some videos off to the side, or like and subscribe. And also, please share it with your friends. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it, and we will see you guys next time.